Good morning, fifth graders. This is Miss Johnson, and we are going to pick back up and finish reading the book that we began yesterday. So I am going to share the rest of the book, Coolies. So we're going to pick right back up where we left off. We had just finished reading about Shek going down and setting the dynamite into the mountains. So as seasons passed, the Chinese laborers carried twice their expected workload at astonishing speeds. At the end of exhausting workdays, Shek and Wang were always glad to get back to their tent. One time, as they headed to their camp on the newly leveled earth, Shek turned to admire a trestle they had just finished. "Someday our family will see our great accomplishment," he said to his little brother. The Chinese worked in 12-hour shifts. They pecked, drilled, and hacked through more and more mountains and hard rock face. Conditions grew dangerously worse. Then the Chinese workers discovered that other non-Chinese laborers were paid more than they were. Were they discriminated against because of their long queues and almond-shaped eyes? These Chinese laborers thought so. They spoke little English and felt helpless. Then, one June day, some 3,000 graders, tunnelmen, and road pavers joined forces and stopped working. They chanted over and over in English, "Equal pay, equal hours." The bosses were furious. "We're not going to tolerate this. No water and no food until you return to work. If you don't cooperate, we will send you back to China." The cooks sneaked barrels of hot tea for the protesters to survive during the cold nights, but with the lack of food and water, in days many of them grew weak. Many of them wondered if the protest should continue. Finally, one night, the workers gathered. Many spoke. Then Shek stood up. "We will all starve if we continue this strike." "We must not forget why we came here," nobody answered. Then one by one, the workers nodded. They thought of their suffering families back home and agreed to return to work the next day. That very night, Shek wrote to reassure their mother, "Ma, please do not worry. We have plenty to eat here in this land of opportunity. Our family will never grow hungry again, and soon we will have a feast together. Shek." So I'm going to stop right there, and I'm going to ask you, if you were in Shek and little Wang and all the other Chinese workers' shoes, would you continue to strike at the risk of being sent back to China when they came there to earn money for their family? Or would you, like Shek recommended, end the strike and go back to work even though they knew they were not getting paid equally? And maybe they were being discriminated against because of their Chinese culture. The United States government pushed the railroad companies to complete the railroad project faster and faster. The two companies were paid by the number of miles. The bosses in turn demanded and pushed their workers to perform faster and faster. Over the winter, the laborers raised trestles, shoveled the fills, and built mile after mile of snow sheds until they finally came down to the foothills in Nevada. There, a snowstorm raged across the countryside. With fear of an avalanche, one had swept away a crew of workers a year earlier. The laborers shoveled relentlessly through the blanket of snow. As usual, Shek made sure his little brother was by his side. Then, in the late afternoon, While the storm still raged, a roaring, crashing sound rolled down on them. Avalanche! Panic, Wong peered through the windy snow. "Shek, where are you?" he shouted. There was no sign of his older brother anywhere. Wong shouted in Chinese at the other workers. "My brother is buried in the snow. Please, please help find him. He'll freeze to death." The boss ran up from the rear and grabbed Wong's arm. "Back to work, you coolie. Enough. Back to work." Wong pulled himself free and began to dig frantically through the snow. With his bare hands, he remembered his older brother's words that they would never be apart. Finally, Wong saw the tip of Shek's boot protruding above the alp of snow. "Gao man!" he shouted. "Help!" Finally, they had found him. The workers helped to dig Shek out of the snow. They found him half frozen and clinging to his shovel, but alive. Wong took off his brown smock and wrapped it around his older brother's frostbitten body. A cook ran to him with a cup of hot tea as the workers carried Shek over to a bamboo mat in a nearby tent. In his arms, Wong cradled Shek and massaged his older brother's shivering body until it began to feel warm. "Yum cha," Wong said, which meant, "Drink tea, my brother." "I will get better," Shek muttered. "I must." As the days passed, Shek became better and better. Though he lost 2 toes from frostbite, he was soon back at his brother's side, back at the sledgehammer, hammering the rails across the deserts and mountains and prairies of the western expanse. 4 years later, it was spring 1869. The Chinese laborers made their way to Promontory Summit, Utah. The 2 railroad lines, Union Pacific and Central Pacific, built by the Irish workers from the east and mostly Chinese workers from the west, would meet there. When they met, there was a big celebration. Railroad managers, townspeople, and other workers were invited, but not the Chinese, not the Coolies. Wong and Shek stood back and watched the ceremony from behind the crowd of reporters and cameras. "We know," Shek said to Wong. "Call us what you will. It is our hands that helped build the railroad." So I'm going to stop right there for just a moment. And I want you to think, if you were in the Chinese workers' shoes, how would you feel if all of these people were at the celebration of the final completion of the railroad, but yet the workers, who obviously were discriminated against, were not invited to be a part of the celebration? And how would you feel? And how would you react to not being included in that because of their culture and that they were not Americans? I would imagine that it did not feel very good for them, and it made them feel like they were less important. After the ceremony, the brothers did not go back to China. Instead, they took the money they had saved and rode west on the new train to find a home. They settled in San Francisco. One day, gathering his thoughts, Wong took out his brush and his ink block and started to write. "Dear Ma, it has been quite some time since we last wrote. Shek is busy minding the store. Already the community in Chinatown knows me as the letter writer. Now I help those who can't read and write send letters home to their families in China. We are hopeful and excited that soon we shall be reunited with you and our brothers here in America, the land of opportunity. Wong." Soon enough, the brothers sent money home again. However, this time, it was money for their family to join them in America. Paw starts a fire in the wastebasket and prepares the firecrackers in the backyard. Now you are ready to pay respect to our ancestors. My grandmother calls out to me, take the paper money and gold paper and throw it into the flames. It will make your ancestors rich in the spirit world forever. As I watch the ashes disappear into the sky, I know I will never forget my ancestors. I will always remember them. How could I forget? And so that is the end of the story. But what's really cool about this book is this is based, even though this is a fiction book, and there's parts of it that is a narrative and it's made up, the actual it's a historical fiction because it's actually based on a real event that happened in history, which is the building of the Transcontinental Railroad. That's why this is one of my favorite books to read, and I wanted to share it with you guys today. So I hope that you enjoyed Coolies. Have a good day.